Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. It's that time of year again. I didn't think I was going to do this project this year due to COVID and so many of the restrictions on interacting, kids interacting. This is the chorus layout for half of the class because they meet one half at the beginning of the week, one half at the end, but you can see the music stands. They got to be in here at 12 feet from everybody. Everybody has to be 12 feet away from everybody else to be able to sing. As far as I think CDC guidelines, or I'm not sure who exactly called that out, but we all are familiar with 6 feet social distancing. But when you're singing, even with a mask on, they wanted them spaced out at 12 feet. So this year we are going to do a musical. Like I said, I didn't think we were, but we're going to be using the entire space as a soundstage. We're not going to have an audience. We're going to record everything. We're going to basically make a movie. And we're going to flip the scene here, so this is going to be the background instead of whatever drops and stuff that we bring in, a psych or whatever, as usual. We're going to turn it around and we're going to film handheld on gimbals and maybe a little crane or some other stuff like that, but we're going to be filming in here, and this is going to be all black, lights out back there. So hopefully we're going to black out this area of the stage that isn't black like this is here, and so everything should be, and we're going to paint in these sort of built-in features to either side all black, and we're going to be at a big black soundstage. We'll have the legs in and the scrim or traveler here black closed, and we'll be in a big black soundstage, and so then we'll play against that. Now these areas, like I said, are going to be built in, and we wanted sort of in unspecific things. The show itself was selected to lend itself to spreading out performers and filming it in small groups. And so many of the scenes in that show don't necessarily have to happen any particular place. So we have these scenes that are like in the ether or in purgatory, or they really don't rely on any kind of setting. We may have a chair or a rug or a couple of chairs and stuff, so you can see our selection of interesting chairs here that we may make small changes to, but we needed these two kind of levels up in the corners to round out our space and get a few people up higher than others so that we can get almost the whole cast on stage for a couple of numbers and keep everybody spread out and keep it interesting rather than a sea of faces at the same kind of elevation. So we worked through a bunch of different ideas here, but really we don't have any budget because we're throwing everything at recording with professional camera gear and equipment and a couple, 2 or 3 professional operators and a director and stuff. So for the photography director. So we kind of had to come up with something from what we already had. So we sifted through the basement, and we have acting boxes and platforms and stairways and things that I've tried to kind of arrange here, and we're going to kind of massage that until we're happy with what we've got. And when we are, we'll paint that all black, and those will be our leave-in pieces. And we're going to have something sort of like this in the middle as well. So when we don't have any other sets in here, people can move up and down and in and around them and create movement and interest to work with the camera. And in the end, this is fake blood, by the way, we'll have something in that for those scenes. Now, a little less than half of the other scenes that are sprinkled throughout the show do actually occur somewhere. And several occur on like a street, on a small street kind of a setting. So, again, we don't have a lot of budget, but what I want to do is the quintessential New York City old storefront kind of look. There is enough there, but also it doesn't have to be anything in particular. It just sort of looks like storefronts. And so if we don't want to build a lot of stuff, this is our idea here, kind of scratched out, but it may be hard to understand, so I'll redraw it. If we don't want to build a lot of volume, a lot of set pieces, a lot of literal stuff, my idea was to sort of bring in, as we head down the road, if this is, the face of the stores, and this is the sidewalk, we could bring in some squares and things that come in and kind of give you that feeling of, something here, and then, like a window box comes out, and just a few light things that kind of, once again, a couple pillars and like a transom window and a door, and, maybe an awning off of this one, and something else here. And now we feel like we're on the road if this stuff is kind of suspended, which is kind of the only way to stand up something so thin. Because of course from the side we're talking about a few things that are only, you know, have a little bit of width as you stand here next to them. They really don't amount to anything. So we would hang them from a bar and be able to bring them in and out. Now here on the street, we have some rolls of AstroTurf that we could kind of put through there, and maybe a garbage can, and you know, we could put like a street lamp, just a pole kind of going straight up. And I haven't left myself enough room here, but some of the other ideas that I've had are some squares of plywood, and I'll go cut off a sapling and mount it to that so that we have like what looks like a tree coming up here and out of sight. And we'll finish this to kind of look like those cast iron grates that can be trimmed as a tree grows around them in the street. But as you can see, with a few things that catch a little light and are the basic forms of walking down the side of the road. And of course we could throw some stuff out like trash here, and you know, since this is just the floor of the stage, maybe a few cigarette butts or something, or just a little bit of stuff like that, and all of a sudden we're on the side of the road. So we can come and go up and down the side of this with camera pointed at it up and down, and we can get like that side scrolling dolly effect. But then we can come around here and we can look down, you know, axially or whatever, more aligned or at 3/4 and stuff, down the road. And we can do some other things in and around that, the way that we dress it. So that's the idea, is with a few storefronts like this and a few items like that, we'll be able to get several different places out of this. So if it's the summer, we can use warm light and a dapple light effect. So we have like what seems like sunlight coming through tree leaves that don't exist, but the dappled light can play out here, warm tones, wardrobe on our characters can make it look like summertime, and, you know, obviously there being green grass in here. Oh, we may do like a fire hydrant and stuff too. We don't want to get too busy, but a few small things like that can really tie stuff together. So this will be green grass, and if it's summertime, you know, and I believe one of the things takes place in a street market, we can have a few like, you know, fruit stand type things kind of going on, and all of a sudden maybe we pull over to the light post and we do like a sun sail or something on that to throw a little color or interest in there. And it's summertime. And then alternatively, whether we use a lot of camera angles, you know, one way for that and the other way for another set, but if we change our angles and we use cool light and we use wardrobe to make people, you know, put people in winter coats, and we cover up the grass and we spread some fake snow around, and we may even sprinkle some down into the frame, and then maybe a little bit of holiday decoration. I am going to have some window boxes, so and to take that angle on it makes it feel like we certainly aren't tricking anybody into thinking it's a different set, but we can get an entirely different feel out of it along with our camera angles that we choose. If we separate the types of angles that we use from one to the other, we can really change things a lot. And lastly, maybe out here, we could put a couple bistro tables, and we could have, you know, a couple chairs, and we could have somebody sitting at what feels like brunch, and we can pull some little tea lights out to the street light or to the tree or what have you overhead, and we can push in and we can do a little over the shoulder back, you know, a small conversation sitting down at what looks and feels like brunch, and those more intimate shots and stuff exclusively rather than wides for any of the rest that we might film here could be a third destination, and we'll get all of that out of basically the same rough components with a little bit of change to the artwork. And so if we have 6 or 7 out of 20 scenes, if a little more than half of them don't happen any particular place, then we have 6 or 7, maybe 8 that call for a place. We've got 3 and maybe even 4, because once again we can be inside looking out too, and that may create something for us. But at least 3 sort of different, slightly different places built around one kind of low budget location. So we don't want cold, uninteresting, lame storefronts. So I went looking for, you know, quintessential New York City downtown, not downtown, but New York City storefronts that are vintage. And one of the places that I found was a bakery that escapes me now, but it basically has like an awning over the top like this, and then a couple of window boxes that come out like that, and a couple corbels under those as they go back in there, and then obviously the wall is down below, underneath, so the window boxes kind of stick out and off the surface, and then back in here is the doorway with a transom window, open it, and a handle. And the nice thing about 2 window boxes is we can put some fun kind of bakery things in there and write the name, you know, on the window or on the awning or whatever. And what's neat is from the side, this really just looks like a box like that, and I may add a little thickness here and put the corbel in and an awning shape. But if I just made 4 of these, I'd have one at the end, one on either edge of the window box. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and make each of these the window box. And I could put a door in between them and a little bit overhead with the awning in here, and I've got what feels like a storefront walking by. And really, it doesn't have much going on like this. In terms of that dimension, it's quite thin, and we can put a few things in the window, like we said. It makes a nice start because I just need to make 4 of those, and if I call this 8 feet, and I call this 6, and I call this width, you know, whatever, 18, a little less than 2 feet, that gets me off and running. Because what I'll do is I'll just use a 2x4, an 8-foot 2x4, a 6-foot 2x4, a couple 15-inch pieces to get me to 18 overall, and then I'll make another piece out here to sort of pack that out a little bit thicker than 1.5 inches, and a little piece to block it over, maybe a little piece to block it over like that. And I'll make 4 sets of these pieces. And then all I have to do is throw some Luan on both sides of them and use a trim router to cut it flush, and I'm off and running. Maybe I'll add a little thing like that so I have something to carry if I have 1, 2, 3, 4 of those. And each of those bulkhead parts, then it's easy to set something on them to get that angle of the awning. So maybe I'll include that. I'll make 4 of these, and that'll get me off and running. And like I say, they'll be 3.5 inches wide. And I'll just kind of represent that like this. And they'll have like sort of a small thick. Obviously, we'll make them out of 2x4. So you'd think we're in pretty good shape here. I mean, with 4 of those and a couple things to space them out in between, as soon as I can get them hung from a bar, we'll be in good shape. And I think overall 3 storefronts, 1, 2, 3, and we'll have what we want for enough street setting. So that's where we started, and it's going to keep our, you know, we have 2x4s and we have Luan, so it's going to be pretty easy, right? Let's go look at some of the things that happen when we think it's easy to do anything, because of course it isn't. And obviously that wasn't my sketch process, by the way. This is more along the lines of what it looks like here, and I used some grid paper just to get a rough idea of if I were to draw in a person at 6 feet, how high would I make this and how wide to make it kind of look right by eye. And then I went and counted what I had for squares, and it gave me a sense of how big it kind of needs to be and how wide to make me feel like I'm in front of a real store and it's not. The aspect ratio is correct. So I arrived at, you know, like I said, about 8 feet to the back of that, and then we'll go up a little bit more to catch the top of that awning, and we'll be at 9 or 10, and that'll be good enough. Now, I've gotten so far as to make enough pieces of lumber to make those crude, you know, 2x4 frames starting out. But some of the issues that we've got are, to start with, we wanted 6-foot pieces, but I hate to cut 6-foot pieces out of 8-foot pieces because we only have so much lumber to work with. And it'd be nice to use something that's less than 8 and more than 6, obviously, rather than wrecking a full 8-foot piece. And though we've got real nice organization this year, overall, things are kind of tidy, all of this lumber in here has got, I mean, I know the ends look like they're kind of set aligned to one another, but really they run out and are just willy-nilly all over the place here. So to look and see what you've got, you've basically just got to start dragging stuff out on the floor. So along with that, you'll find screws that, in this case, I mean, this kind of sucks, but at least it's sticking out, so if I manage not to stab my finger on it, I'll at least know it's there. But there are some that are broken off flush, because of course screws are brittle and hardened, unlike nails, and when they break off flush to the surface, and if I'm not really careful, yes, they are hardened, like I say, if I find that with a saw, it's a really bad time. So you're looking for that. Also, I have no sense of how long anything is, so I start just pulling things out. And then I start looking down the lengths of everything, and I start checking for straightness. I'm looking for something that doesn't twist left or right over the course of it. I'm looking for something that doesn't wander as a road and turn whatsoever. I can deal with a little bit of bow in this aspect. If to look down this, I saw a little bit of arc this way or that way, I can control that. But there's no changing something that in this way rolls over like a banana like this or that. There's no straightening him out like that, and there's no twisting him back to that, you know, that rectangle as it travels all the way to the other end needs to stay straight. If it rotates, twists one way or the other, you're never getting that twist out of it. And that's where we are upstairs. So once I thought I had, now Chazzy did its best job of finding good candidates for these major pieces that were nice and straight, and he went so far as to cut a few to 6 feet and start pinning them together. Now on the left here, we have an ideal candidate. We have an ideal specimen. Well, excuse me, I'm in the middle. The end of it sits flat here, and it sits flat down there at the far end. See it there, flat on the floor? Let me turn my headlight off. The problem over here, his neighbor, it does not sit flat on the floor. Down there it does. But if I make it flat down there, or if I make it flat here, it lifts down there. And that's because this piece, despite my best efforts, is a little bit twisted. And we got this far before we noticed. So we're going to unscrew this, and we're going to go down, and we're going to find ourselves a better candidate to make a 6-foot piece, and we're going to remake that piece. Then we're going to come up and get this far, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we're going to turn around, and on these 8-foot pieces, we're going to apply these frames. Now this one does also tip just the tiniest bit here, but this floor isn't absolutely perfect, and that's kind of the amount that you can force out of something with tightening it down with screws. This over here is too much. You're never going to straighten that out. And the problem with all of this is it's built so lightly that if you put these all together like this, and then you cover them with Luan, and you hang them up, and you're looking for these to give you the sense that you're in front of something architectural, and they aren't as close as you can possibly be to flat and straight, each one of them, as you look down the front of them at too much of an extreme angle, as you are looking right at it, it might look good. And as you close on it, as my 4 fingers here, and you start to see things like this out of alignment, if it doesn't hang straight up and down perfectly down the surface as close as you can get it to, it really looks terrible. And I don't want us to end up with a ton of angles that we avoid but end up having to keep because we've got a good performance otherwise, and the background, the set looks terrible because it just ended up happening at an angle that shows the set in its worst light. So our best practice is to make something that looks as good as we can possibly make it look from as many angles as humanly possible, and that's how everything's approached for film, because you never want to have an otherwise good take, but you have an unfavorable angle on anything, a creature, a puppet, a set, or anybody. You don't want to get a good take with someone's hair is screwed up or they have a booger in their nose. You just want to have everything perfect, which is why film is so costly. So we're going to go back to the drawing board on these and try to get 4 simple shapes like this out of them that aren't twisted around, and then we're going to be able to join them together. And the last thing that ended up throwing a wrench in my works is that I had planned to suspend them because, once again, we're going to be looking at things from this side with that deep, impossible blackness behind, and that's what we want to kind of have. And I hadn't intended to bring this stuff in on a bar and bring it down, and then for all the while that we use it, but when we don't need it, it'll go right on up and out of our way, and really it's going to be quite rickety and spindly and weak, and it won't have a lot of structural integrity. So it's best that if we're not using it, it goes right on up out of sight and nobody bumps into it or has to skid it and slide it all around. Unfortunately, once you hang it somewhere, you're married to that position. And any of our light arrangements or any changes we want to make, my director has kind of said, it'd be nice to be able to move those around. Could they stand up on their own? Obviously, I can do anything, but there's going to be even more trouble trying to put a stand behind something like this. So I'm going to show you here, rather than being hanging down, the only way you can really solve this is to put big, kind of gusset legs behind everything, going back, and they could be painted black, but still, even though you've got strength this way, you really still haven't got side to side strength that way, because these are all, in the end, to look at them, big squares. There is no triangulation. There's no truss. Anywhere that you do things like this, anywhere that you triangulate, you freeze the other 2 lengths from changing this angle at all. This angle can't change now from 90 degrees or whatever angle it's trapped at, because to change that angle, these 2 points right here and right here have to move away or nearer to one another, and as soon as you lock that in with a rigid member, if you know what I'm saying, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, it stops the angle from changing, and that controls this thing from turning into a rhombus and everybody racking over and everything just going and falling on the floor. And the only thing that stops that now, without any triangulation, is these button pass joints where you screw into the end of a piece of material. And that really, you're asking an awful lot not to bend or break a fastener there when the lever arm on it is several feet long. And that's what's happening, right here, if we zoom in on this. It's just it's an awful lot to ask. And we obviously can't throw stuff in like that or it starts to ruin the aesthetic. So we spiral right out of control. We snowball into issues trying to get it to stand on its own. And we haven't determined exactly what we're going to do just yet, but this is where we are with something that's so theoretically simple. If you've seen the Addams Family set that I did last year, it's quite complex as compared to this, but it really goes off without a hitch because it's constructed the way that anything is. Normal stairs and normal walls are constructed, and those have kind of the most efficient strength to weight and cost ratio that you can get, which is how we got to that point. It's why we build things the way that we do. To build things any lighter and be more avant-garde or creative about how we go doing it just sucks time and energy. It just goes and goes and goes. Like I said, from trying to find the right length of lumber that makes sense to cut down to finding something that isn't twisted and you know, keeping it lightweight, but not, and so therefore you're not able to rely on multiple elements in multiple directions that are controlling the squareness, the flatness, and the smoothness of something. We're relying on the very simplest, you know, fewest components to kind of outline a shape in space, and it's just, though it seems simple in one way, it's incredibly difficult in another. So let's follow along while we take this journey to creating a very usable, dynamic space that feels like the side of the road in an old part of New York City in front of some very quaint shops. And we'll see how much we're able to squeeze out of our cheap, no material budget project this year. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned. We'll see you.